Seems like a good time to get started now. I haven't seen anybody come in about 2 minutes. So welcome everybody to Alaska Photographic Center's first big event of the season. Our Rarefied Light Juror, Nevada Wier, is here to give her artist talk or photo talk. I'm Mike Conti. I'm the photography professor here at UAA and also Camera Club advisor and APC board member. So this is co-sponsored by Camera Club at UAA. I'm going to turn the mic over to Bonnie Landis, our APC president, and she'll talk about Rarefied Light, and then I'll come back and introduce Nevada.
Thanks, Mike. Well, welcome to the 26th Juror Lecture. As most of you know, APC is a nonprofit organization formed in 1983, and our mission is to promote fine art photography in Alaska through education and exhibitions. So each year we seek out a nationally known, recognized artist to jury the Rarefied Light show, present a public lecture, and then do our workshop. And we are very honored this year to welcome Nevada Wier. I'd like to thank my fellow board members for making this happen, help make it possible. Mike, you've met, Lauren Holmes, Matt Johnson, Young Kim, Jason Lazarus, Petra Lycheski, Gail Neufeld, and Kevin Smith. So thank you, APC board, for all your work. This year we had 488 entries by 65 Alaska artists. For inclusion in the final exhibit, Nevada chose 50 pieces by 33 artists. The best of show is awarded to Naona Peaches Wallen from Ketchikan for Fresh Catch. And the show will be going to the State Museum in Juneau this year, so they're kind of excited that they have a Southeast artist to feature. Nevada chose 5 pieces for the Honorable Mention Award. George Cassidy from Anchorage, In the Garden. Joanna Grasso, Anchorage, for Municipal Greenhouse. Toby Harriman, Anchorage, for ANA A380 Flying Hanu over Iwa Beach Golf Course. Sorry, I can't show you these right now. Petra Lycheski, Anchorage, for In Distress at 250, ? And Kevin Smith, Anchorage, for Emo 6. So congratulations to all the award winners. And congratulations to all the artists whose work will be in the exhibit this year, and thanks to everyone who entered this year's call. Rarefied Light will open at the International Gallery with the first Friday on October 3rd, so we hope to see you there. And an exhibit of Nevada's infrared work will run concurrently with the Anchorage exhibit, so that's a treat that we have here in town. The exhibit will then travel the state to Juneau, Fairbanks, and Cordova. So APC would like to remember Bob Hallinaugh, longtime APC member and Rarefied Light artist. He won the Best of Show in 2021, and he was in many Rarefied Light shows throughout the years. So we will miss him dearly. There are a few workshop openings if anyone's interested. We start tomorrow night, 5 to 8. We changed that from 4 to 7. And then all day, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to 5. So let me know, come up and see me afterwards if you're interested. And we'll get to the reason we're here tonight, to enjoy the presentation by our juror, Nevada Wier.
Also, thanks to Dan Anto and Abigail for running tech and live stream. Nevada Wier is a photographer specializing in documenting the remote corners and cultures of the world. She is recognized for her creative and intimate approach to people, as well as her intriguing infrared images. She has been published in numerous national and international publications, including National Geographic, National Geographic Traveler and Adventure, Geo, Outside, and Smithsonian. Her fine art prints are featured in public and private collections. She is represented by the Obscura Gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Nevada has been featured in television productions such as National Geographic Explorer, National Geographic Through the Lens, and Canon Photo Safaris. She has been a speaker on the nationwide tour Live from National Geographic. She is a fellow of the Explorers Club and a member of the Women's Geographic Society. Let's welcome Nevada Wier.
I have to go pick up my things. Okay, can you hear me? All right, great. Well, what an honor to be here. I have to tell you, judging that contest was a really, really tough, particularly when it got down to the last 100. And if any of you in this audience submitted, thank you, because it's really wonderful to get to see your work, and then also for you to have it in print, which I really love the printing process. And so tonight I'm going to talk to you about how I got started in photography. It's been kind of a convoluted journey, and I'll show you some of the current projects that I'm working on. I'll talk a little bit about the infrared work that I do, so we'll just get started. So I want to just mention a little bit about seeing photographically, because that's what the workshop is about coming up. And it's really important because a lot of times, particularly because I work in the travel genre, people tend to go, oh, that's interesting, click, instead of thinking of it as art. And Edward Weston is the one who coined this phrase, seeing photographically. And he's an example I use that, look what Edward Weston did with a bell pepper. Because I always say there's no such thing as a boring subject. There's just really boring ways of photographing it, okay? Really boring ways. And in the travel industry, it's been my experience and it's evolved greatly. And of course, I'm self-taught. I was talking to Petra about this, which means that the photographer doesn't know anything, right? I mean, the teacher, I'm teaching myself, so what do I know? I learn from studying these photographers and reading about them, because the early photography, I think, really matters. And Alfred Stieglitz, he was so important in spreading, a photographer's work around the world. He owned galleries, and he was just absolutely critical. And I think all of us know Dorothea Lange with her really poignant and very important social work that she did with magazines, particularly, and newspapers. And a lot of people don't recognize Aaron Siskin because he was the first to really work with a lot of details and see things in a completely different way, seeing differently, and not just, seeing objects as art. And of course, we all know Henri Cartier-Bresson, but this is the best quote he's ever had. Your first 10,000 photographs are your worst, okay? And I think it continues past that. But, I think photography is really hard. Paul Capernegro, a more contemporary photographer, and just because he puts real heart in his images, because photography is about emotion. It's about feeling. And Elliot Porter was really important to me, because I started out in black and white, which I'll discuss. But Elliot Porter was contemporaneous with most of these photographers that I've been showing you, with many of them, and he was a color master, and he was the first one to bring color photography forward as an art, because it was pretty much all black and white. And he lived in Santa Fe. I had the good chance to meet him at some point, but his book, A Place No One Knew, was a true inspiration to me. So I'll talk about this a long time ago. And, I was born in Texas, but I grew up in Washington, D.C. So it's either Nevada, depending on what side of the Continental Divide you're on, it's Nevada or Nevada. Now I'm in New Mexico. But I didn't start photography until after college, and I fell in love with this wooden Deerdorf camera. I mean, I think I fell in love with the myth of like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon with a scar, you know, the black thing over your head. But you know, it was at that point I was working for Outward Bound. I went to college in Arizona, and suddenly my life from DC switched to climbing and kayaking and heavy outdoor experiences. And this was a very bad backpacking camera, right? But I loved it, okay? But then my brother gave me a Pentax Spotmatic, and I built a darkroom in the basement of the Outward Bound School in Santa Fe. This is in 1974, 75. And the alchemy. Who here has worked in a darkroom? Right. Yay for all of you. Those fumes, those toxic vapors that that give us like all sorts of weird dreams, right? It was just so much fun working with that and the burning and the dodging. I just still have some of my old notebooks that I went. And again, I was climbing, I was working, I did the graphic design work for the Outward Bound School. And when I went out on these trips in the 70s, and then I was a guide on the Colorado River. That was really fun. And then my first international expedition, I went to Bolivia in 1978. And I went down with a friend of mine, Jeff Sauls, and we were going to go climbing Illampu, this 23,000-foot peak that's outside La Paz. But as we were going through the airport, they confiscated our climbing gear because there was a coup going on. So we was like, well, what are we going to do? And Jeff said, well, Thor Heyerdahl hired these people in Bolivia to make his boat that he went across the ocean. Let's make a reed boat and go around Lake Titicaca. And I went, sure, okay? So we built this, you saw this boat, 23 feet long, 6 feet wide, but I'm not a sailor, and Jeff wasn't a sailor. We didn't know what a keel was, okay? That was a real problem, okay? So we went. It took 3.5 months. This is a really dubious honor, because originally we were going to go partway around the lake. We'd gotten our climbing gear back. Then we were going to go up to the Cordillera Polobamba and climb. But once we got started, we got committed. And in those days, there was no roads around there, and going between Bolivia and Peru was just not a problem. So 3.5 months. So it's a very dubious honor. But that was when the first time I ever used color. And I remember I had 30 rolls of color film, which I thought was amazing amount of film. I worked on the day in the life of projects where I would shoot hundreds in one day, but this went on for months. But it was really different for me. So I had one Pentax Spotmatic that was color and one that was black and white. And I still had my darkroom in Santa Fe. And I love making prints. And that's why, you know, the infrared's been interesting, because I'm going back to printmaking. So this was, we were pretty bedraggled, but we finished this trip. And, you know, I learned, at that point, before this, I was doing downhill skiing and running and kayaking. Whitewater kayaking was my big thing. I had to really slow down on that lake. And I learned a lot about photography. I mean, we would get stuck sometimes for like a week, because we couldn't land on shore. We had to tie up in the Tortora Reed. So, and it was this awareness too about photography, that it takes a lot of time. And then right after that, I was asked to go to Nepal to run a trekking program, which was fantastic. So again, I thought I was going to be an outdoor climbing photographer. I can't compare myself to the guys who are today. It was in a much different level, of course. But what happened is I found out that I was much more interested what was at the bottom of the mountain than I was at the top, because there were every day I was going through different cultures and people and things like that. And I had this Mamiya 645, and I didn't have to carry anything except my cameras, which was like a huge amount of gear. But I was liberated from ropes and stoves and all those things, because we had porters, and I loved it. So I had this 645 for black and white, which I still have the negatives for, and I really want to reprint some of these. And amazing time to be in Nepal, because there was very few roads, and everyone was walking. I was going all over the place. And I love this book. I don't know if you've read it, the Songlines. it's about, why we are just so restless. We're migratory people. And I just really felt that everyone's on the move. Everyone was like carrying things around the mountains. And I just really resonated to this. And I realized that I'm born to roam. There's just no question. And color, I had my color. I had a Nikon. It was the F3. And, I'm going to talk about centeritis tomorrow. It's a dreaded disease, but I had it kind of bad when I first started out. I think everybody does. But the photograph of the porter that you see on your right side over there, that was the first image I ever made that I really liked. And that's when I went, oh, photography's about feeling. This is how I feel when I'm in Nepal. It's not about the mountains. It's about the people walking the trails and how he has a really content expression or just musing expression. And it was a feeling, it was a photograph that really touched me about how I feel about, in that world. And I realized that, like I said, I worked for a newspaper for a year in Santa Fe, and then I said, no, I got to keep traveling, because I just found that I just became like a sensory junkie, right? And I just traveled very, very minimalistically, and I did this trip in 1985. China was barely opening up, and my friends and I decided we were going to go ski mountaineering in Sichuan, okay, because someone told us there was great snow. And we went by train, and we carried all this gear with us, and we're going across, China with little notes in Chinese, trying to get places. We get to Chengdu, and we talk to the Chinese Mountaineering Association, and we get all ready to go, and we crest this 15,000-foot peak, and there's no snow. And we're standing there in our little red suits that North Face gave us. These pigs are running around. And that was kind of a shock. So we went in search of the Chinese ski team, which we found a remnant of in Harbin up in Manchuria. And because they were training in Europe, because that's where the snow was. So anyway, but then I was photographing the ice festival. And again, when I would photograph, I had no idea what I was doing. But I learned if you don't try, if you don't even try, nothing's going to happen, right? I also learned that why were we trying to, do this climbing trip in China when a bicycle trip would have made more sense? Why wasn't I working with the flow of the country? And that really, because I realized what a difference between walking in Nepal with everybody, and it would have been so different if we had chose a different mode of transportation. Now, of course, it's very, very different. But from there, we went on to, with some friends, going up to eastern Tibet, to Minyaganka. And again, the two guys I was with, they really wanted to go climbing. But again, I had this feeling that it was down there in the monastery. I wanted to be and live and sleep with the people that were down there in the monastery. And amazing situations. And then after that, Songpan Grasslands, I went to, and I had this wonderful fixer, Shui Biao, who managed our things. This was in 1987. There was a lot of stuff going on in Tibet in those years. I can't believe we got permission. But I brought out my maps, because I was a real map person, outward bound, and I had all these maps, and Shui Biao just pushes them all aside, and he takes out this blank piece of paper, and what he does is he draws this circle, and he goes, "There's your map." And I was like, okay. So Michael and I, we've just followed this guy for 7-8 days, this bewildered away minority person. And, we went to sky burials, and we met up with these amazing tribal people. And again, I learned everything matters in an image, okay? So I'm trying to tie photography together with my travels. Everything matters in an image. That's how I feel. You work with slides. You don't change anything. If you tell an editor you want to crop something, I would never get hired. Everything has to matter in my image, especially the things that don't. But control is an illusion also. And really, I just feel like I'm just following this blank piece of paper towards interesting places. And all of these things has led to me to be able to plan expeditions and think of ideas. So I'm going to show you right now just a little, it's like 7 or 8 minutes of a little video that I did. It's a little smaller than the screen, about these 4 expeditions that led me to my first National Geographic assignment.
I first visited the Pamir Mountains in western China in 1986. 3 friends and I decided to explore a remote area behind Mustagada and Kongor, 2 splendid mountains well above 25,000 feet near the border of Pakistan. After the trail became too steep for the camel we had hired, we shouldered our packs. Referring to a map drawn in 1925 by C.P. Scrine, the British Consulate General in Kashgar, we aimed for a 17,000-foot pass, the Karatosh Dawan. After 4 days of exploring and guessing, we crossed what we thought was the pass. It was horrible, terrible, knee-high snow, post-holing, and huge moraine. I don't know how high it was. All I know is that I was carrying an extremely heavy pack full of camera gear that I thought was going to be carried by a camel. We spent the night in an ice cave and then traveled down a narrow, steep canyon to a small village. As far as the Kyrgyz were concerned, we had arrived from Mars because, as it turned out, the pass we had crossed was not the Karatosh Dawan. In fact, not surprisingly, it wasn't a pass at all. On Scrine's map, it was marked unexplored terrain. The Kyrgyz were extremely bewildered by our presence. We communicated with broken Chinese, gestures, and pictures drawn in the sand. We were able to make ourselves somewhat understood and hired donkeys from village to village to carry our packs. The day before we arrived at a roadhead, we were hailed by a man on horseback who was looking for 4 Russian spies. Although he was delighted we weren't, we still were escorted back to Kashgar and put under detention until we convinced the Chinese we weren't the CIA nor the KGB. In 1988, I returned to the Pamirs with some friends to explore more of the area and with the intention to climb some of the sharp, difficult peaks in the Shawakte Range, further up the Chimgan Valley. We trekked in via the Karatosh Gorge, a much easier route than crossing the high ridges. Our Kyrgyz friends were amazed to see us again and immediately made us feel welcome. At that moment, I made a pivotal choice. Even though I loved to climb, I decided I was going to stay behind in the villages to photograph while my friends went off exploring the Shawakte. I was becoming more intrigued by what was to be found at the bottom of the mountains than at the top. Tursun Timur invited me to stay with his wife and 4 children. I slept and ate in their 1-room mud home and roamed the village with my camera and a few Kyrgyz words. At the end of the week, we rode off to Chimganayaki. The village was teeming with people. I was taken to a house where all the women were gathering to eat huge plates of mutton and bread. Later, I rode out to a field to watch a buskashi game, a kind of horse polo with the stuffed skin of a headless goat as a ball. I found out 6 years later that I had attended a wedding and had photographed the bride. I stayed with Tursun and his family for 10 remarkable days, and for years after, I often thought of them and knew I would return again. And I did in 1994 with Carol Dunham, an anthropologist, a few other friends, and 2 young Uyghur girls who would be our translators. It was wonderful to communicate directly with my Kyrgyz friends and begin to learn about their family life, Muslim religion, and their customs. One day we traveled to a nearby village to witness a nazir, a grieving ceremony held 30 days after a death. Hundreds of neighbors and relatives gathered for a feast, while in a small room the close family clustered and mourned with prayers and tears. culminating with the wife of the deceased sinking into a deep trance of tremendous sorrow and grief. I know they don't understand why I care so much about their lives to keep coming back. To be honest, I don't have an answer. Yet there is a personal and photographic satisfaction in spending time with the culture and penetrating beyond the surface. The challenge is to let go of my cultural and visual preconceptions as my camera and I delve deeper into their world. In 1996, I returned for the 4th time to the Chimgan Valley. I stayed over 6 weeks photographing the autumn harvest and the days of preparations for the wedding ceremonies held in October. It hasn't been easy to earn the trust of the Kyrgyz. The minorities in China still fear persecution and betrayal, and the Kyrgyz have been very protective about their stories and customs. Yet finally, after a span of 10 years, I feel as if I am a respected friend and not just a foreign visitor. On the day of the wedding, a large banquet is held for the multitude of relatives and guests that have ridden to Chimgan, some for many days. The bride is kept cloistered behind a screen in her family's home, and during the ceremony, she keeps her face hidden under her jacket. After the blessings and the songs are sung, the bride returns to her seclusion for 3 days, and the men celebrate with buskashi, or in the Kyrgyz language, ogla tartish. Traveling in China and dealing with the bureaucracy is frustrating. The long trek into the Pamirs and living in rough conditions is demanding, but I suspect I'll be back again. As Marcel Proust said, the real voyage of discovery consists not of seeing new landscapes, but in having new eyes.
Well, I can't say I ever went back again, unfortunately. I was supposed to go on another trip just like a month before the event of 9/11, and I haven't been back. And of course, now this area is heavily policed, and a very difficult area for me to go back to. I would definitely be escorted away. But again, tenacity. I think when people ask, well, how do you get through this type of career? And of course, the type of career I've gone through, which I've discussed with a number of people here, is practically gone and vanishing. But it doesn't matter. It's still about tenacity. If you really want to do something, I don't care if you're a musician or you want to be a doctor or songwriter, whatever. You have to desperately want it. And I desperately wanted this lifestyle, and no one can tell me how to do it. If you have to be the type of personality that can figure it out on your own, because that's how it works in the arts, in any field in the arts, okay? It's not just about going to school. And I wanted it more than anything. And a lot of people dream to work for National Geographic, and I did, of course. And I don't feel as if it's the apex of what I've done by any means, but it was important to me. And one of the reasons, and people think it's not about the photography, is that I knew how to do logistics. I knew how to plan expeditions. So I loved rivers. So I did this proposal to the Expedition Council at Geographic, because the Blue Nile was the last undammed major river in the world. That's not true anymore, but at the time, completely undammed. Ethiopia was just coming out of a war with Eritrea, and it was open. And they'd been wanting to do a story about the Blue Nile, and I gave them the way to do it by contacting my friend Conrad Hirsch, who lived in Addis Ababa, and he understood exactly what I wanted to do. I wasn't trying to do a first, like first ever, because people have been down the river and there's these really difficult rapids right below this waterfall. And we figured out that the only way to do this trip would be to go in the rainy season, which means we couldn't have rafted the upper section completely. That wouldn't be possible. We'd have to walk 100 miles and then get onto rafts and raft for 500 miles. And that's what we did. So we went down this, amazing stretch of river, and I'm just going to condense, this trip, which I did with Ginny Morrell, a National Geographic writer, and Geographic TV was there. And sadly, right before the trip, Conrad Hirsch was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he wasn't able to go, which really broke my heart. But we did finally make it, and this is the waterfall where we started. This is a mere trickle now because it's dammed up. And again, remember, I'm with film. I had 500 rolls of film, and trying to keep it, all these travels, just dealing with. I didn't care about the X-ray machines. I just cared about the heat and any other type of damage. So we walked again, 100 miles until we got to this bridge, the Portuguese bridge, and we had to cross this bridge. This is a young boy we met who I think was the ultimate budget traveler. He wanted to be a shoeshine boy, but we had to cross this rope bridge to get to our rafts on the other side. And again, there's many, many stories I could tell you about the Blue Nile. But I'm just making this short because the best part for me was when we got down lower, past the rapids and all the other parts and the crocodiles and the hippos and everything, and got to the people, where I was with the Gamoose people and had dances. And of course, we got pulled over and we had to have checks with our papers and had great translators. And then, afterwards, we were on the river. The whole trip on the walking in the river was like 6 weeks. I got off the river, and I was petrified because I wasn't sure I had a story. There's some tough conversations with the boatman who didn't want the raft to camp near people, and Ginny and I wanted to talk to people, and expeditions. This is what happens if you have to involve other people. So. Ginny and I decided we wanted to go up to the source of the Nile. We went up together, and this is where at the very, very top of the Gihon, the holy, holy river, which is very important. And then at the end, we actually walked quite a bit down the little Blue Nile. It was called the Abai Wens. And then finally we went to Lake Tana, and by the end of that, I was there for close to 2.5-3 months again. Did a lot more than I did at Lake Titicaca, and finally felt as if we had a complete story. And of course, going through the editors there is absolutely terrifying. You kind of wear sponges under your arms when you talk to the editors with your pictures. But it's like pride and humility. I mean, this was really important to me to finish this expedition. There are many things I wish could have gone differently, but you let those things go. And I... things that look simple, they're not. Nothing's really simple. And I find the more I photograph, the higher my expectations for myself becomes, and the more I challenge myself, and I hope all of you feel the same way. I'm really glad I had the background in black and white. That I think really helped me deeply to understand contrast. I'm going to talk about that, how I see when I look at the potential of an image, because I'm looking for what I can photograph, not looking for things that I really can't. I'm looking for things that are photogenic, because there's a big difference between picturesque than photogenic. And so I'm looking at the skeleton of light with a veneer of color, because I think color is absolutely critical. And I worked for all these different magazines. Islands Magazine sent me to Kodiak Island to photograph that, which was really fun. So that was probably the last time I was in Alaska, and I also did a dog sledding trip earlier than that, too. But what I'm going to show you now are just, I've just picked out just a selection of images just to show you a little bit of the evolution of my photography before I talk about some other projects. To just 1 minute. So now what I'm gonna show you what I've done for the last 12 months. I travel about, I'm not supposed to be over here, supposed to be over here. I travel about 6 to 8 months out of the year still. I'm, like I said, born to roam. My mother's convinced that the baby carriage was switched. So, but this year I spent a lot of time in Santa Fe because I had a show coming up. It just ended on my infrared images that I'm going to talk about next. So I was at home printing. I didn't think I was becoming a photographer to sit in front of a computer, but I do, just like all of us do. But we'll just talk about this a little bit. I had a ticket left over from COVID that with Turkish Airlines, a business class ticket. And I said, I'm going to Istanbul for 3 days. So I went to Istanbul, which I'd been to before, which was great. I was by myself. I didn't have a project. I didn't, it was just kind of, it was very freeing. And I was really interested in going into the cisterns because I remembered them and I wanted to photograph. And I visited like as many of the cisterns as I could in 3 days to photograph inside because they're absolutely amazing. And of course, there's cats everywhere. I love cats. Cats are great. And then I was in the summer festivals in Japan, which are, I go to Japan about once or twice every year. And the summer festivals, they have these huge floats that they make out of very thin washi paper and lit up, and fireworks everywhere, and it's blazing hot. And then these, these like 10-story floats that they make, that they've built a special container for, and in this wonderful little town. And then lantern festivals. It was just wonderful. And so I was photographing that for about a couple of weeks, and of course it rained a lot. I love photographing in the rain. And then I was in Eastern Bhutan. I've been to Bhutan quite a bit. Eastern Bhutan is lesser known, and I had been up in this area 10 years before, walking up into the hills to villages that now have roads. So I started out, and so this is an amazing village. So I was there when they were carrying the electricity lines and the rooftops up, and now they have a road, which is so helpful for them. It's not about tourism, it's about access to possibility and to medical care. And of course, that's really, really important. But I love this t-shirt, and I wish it was correct, but don't think it is. And the elders are still there, and of course they're still wearing their remarkable, beautifully colored clothing that they weave themselves. Sikkim, India to me is the most interesting country in the world. It's huge. If Africa was a country, we'd have a discussion. But India, I'm doing a project called Outer India, photographing like as many of the tribal groups as I can. So I was going up to Sikkim, which I hadn't been to in quite a while. Darjeeling had changed a lot. And, again, I'm looking for things that are easily overlooked. You know, besides photographing the obvious beauty, which we tend to do as travelers because it's new and exciting, there's a beauty to, like I was saying in the premieres talk, there's a beauty to going back to places more than once, and I do have that luxury because I can look at it differently. That's why you all have the luxury of photographing Alaska in your backyard. And if you can do that well, then you have to train yourself to do that when you travel and overcome kind of the excitement. But I was there to go on a long trek up to the Kanchenjunga base camp. I've been on the Nepal side, but I hadn't been on the Sikkim side. And I have to say, going up to 16,000 feet in about 6 days, it actually was okay going up. But then I had to go down in 2 days, 6,000 feet. 10,000 feet. And then later, I went to Kyushu, Japan, and this is the volcano that actually exploded a couple of months ago, but it was always steaming. It was always steaming while we were there, and it's a beautiful part of Japan. And oftentimes, I will just see a possibility. I'll see an environment like I did here because I'm a storyteller, and so I see, these vending machines are ubiquitous in Japan, and I like that. And then I wait. It's like I'm praying. It's like, please someone walk in, please someone walk in. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And then I went up to get a view with a couple thousand other people to look down on Hiroshima. And then I got fixated by this radio tower because it wasn't, that was just, everyone was making that image. Everyone had their phone out. Everyone was making the same image. And I'm looking around going, what am I doing? And then I saw this radio tower, and I thought it was amazing. And I had this really short lens, a 10 to 20 millimeter lens. So I was trying that. As you can see, I'm not really a landscape photographer, but I try my best when I'm in those situations to do what I can. And I only work handheld. I find tripods confining, so I don't, unless I'm totally forced. With film, I was forced many times, but not so much with digital. But I'm looking for what's beautiful in the world, and I do like details. So I came back and I started printing my show, but I couldn't stay in Santa Fe for the show. I had like 4 or 5 months to finish it. So I went to Hokkaido for a week to photograph the ice festivals, which I'm going to go back to. But also there was no snow in Santa Fe this year. It was really sad. No skiing. So this is infrared, which I'm going to talk about, right? A few infrared images. This is infrared also from the aquarium. And this is also infrared from Lake Toya in the winter. And then in March, Colombia. I love Colombia. So sad to hear about this earthquake. And it's so colorful. And I've been to the Easter festivals before, but again, going back is really wonderful. So I like working in low light. I like working in difficult conditions because what I'm looking for is what I call a snowflake image. That I want to make an image that I don't think it's going to be, not that people couldn't make it if they were there, but that you just don't repeat them because they're momentary. And that's one of the reasons I like photographing with people, because it's so unpredictable. And I have to use my instincts, and I have to have social skills, and I have to get involved, and I have to come in close, and I have to be, I wouldn't say fearless, but I'm looking for people that are really comfortable being photographed. And I have learned, and I'll talk about that in the workshop. I find that 90% of the world loves to be photographed. It's just about how you do it, how you approach people. But most of and of course, some countries are easier than others. That's obvious. Colombia, it's very easy. It's beautiful. And then I went to Greenland. I was the National Geographic expert just couple of weeks ago in Greenland, and you guys are going to laugh because you're like, we see icebergs all the day, But me, it was like really exciting for me to come from hot Santa Fe that's on fire, and then to go to this area. And I'm sorry, this is the first polar bear I've ever seen. So I know you guys have seen many polar bears, but for me, you haven't? Oh. I saw one with 2 cubs. It was just magnificent. And I like what's called environmental pictures. I want to show with people and also wildlife too. I want to show the environment they live in, So that was good because they were pretty far away, so it was helpful. And of course, the details of the icebergs. I had been to East Greenland before, but this time we went across from Iceland and then to East Greenland and then went all the way around to West Greenland. But again, I'm looking for things that are atmospheric. And so when the sun came out, again, I had to work with light and shadow. Everything has to matter. And, this is about pattern and composition. It's not about an iceberg or a mountain. It's really about color and composition. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the workshop. Color, light, action, pattern. You got to have two of those. But magnificent, scenery. So let me talk a little bit about infrared light, okay? Does anybody here work with infrared? You do? Black and white? Or anybody work with color infrared? Okay, that was a maybe, not so well, is that what you're saying? Okay, anybody on this side work with infrared? So this side has it. All right, so I first started, it was in the 90s, and I missed the era of black and white infrared. I didn't have my darkroom anymore, but Kodak had an Ektachrome film. And I know some of you guys recognize these album covers. This was all infrared, okay, because they didn't have Photoshop in those days. So this was color Ektachrome film. And so it very sensitive. I would take 10 rolls of film with me. And I knew no one was going to publish these images. I didn't care. I love photography. I love experimenting. And so for me, just wanted to work with this amazing, bizarre film. And I had, if some, a very irritating X-ray person wanted to open the canisters, they had to use a black bag to go in because they would have destroyed it if they'd opened the canister. But wild colors, and I used it very judiciously, of course. And I'm working with near infrared, all right? I'm working with this is, of course, we have the visible light, but this is infrared. This is like Silence of the Lambs right over here, okay? Far infrared, forensic, see in the dark things. But near infrared, I'm like right up near the spectrum. And you can see this is daylight, okay? That, it's pretty much, it's half infrared. And think about that. Like, there's insects and birds and mantis shrimp and who see infrared and ultraviolet. I mean, we are so vision impaired, okay? So I got really intrigued with this kind of almost metaphysical concept of photographing what I can see, but with light that I can't see, okay? And of course, depending on what nanometer, I'm not going to get too technical about this, but it depends on how much visible light comes through. And the easiest to work with is black and white. And there's, starting in infrared is no simple thing, as you learned over there. But it takes some time. Black and white's easier. Working with color is harder, and they just take off the filter. Digital made such a huge difference because with an SLR camera, it wasn't focusing. It was focusing on the visible light plane, not on infrared. So because it was the flip up of the mirror, and so it was like F8 and pray. That was like my because I didn't know where the focus was going to be, and I couldn't see the infrared through the viewfinder. So with mirrorless, changed everything because it's focusing on the sensor. And I could see through my viewfinder my custom white balance. Okay, so here's two examples of visible light versus the infrared light. And so in yucky, there's a lot of light here, but it's really yucky light. Great scene, but for infrared, it's fantastic. So I was always carrying, and I still do, carry two cameras. So I'm trying to bifurcate myself and seeing infrared light and seeing invisible light. So here's in Cuba, I'm photographing into this mirror over here, okay, with my infrared camera, all right? And they're all wearing black, but depending on how the light is, whatever dye was in the skirts, you can't predict the colors. It's usually some blues and yellows and occasionally a little green, magenta, but this is what I'm working with. And they don't pop out of the camera looking like this. There's first you gotta know what equipment to use, because not all cameras work with infrared, not all lenses work with infrared, but then it's 1/3 knowing what to photograph, and 2/3 it's in the processing. So I've had exhibits with infrared, but the first complete infrared was in 23, where, and again, I really kind of massage these images to bring out the color, you know, because it's embedded in there, and I have to work with it. This was one of my oldest cameras, and it was so good with infrared, okay? And of course, I'm working a lot in Photoshop with layers and masks, and working on little pieces of my images to bring out the magentas and the yellows and the burning and the dodging and all that. But again, one thing to realize is I don't remove anything from my images. I don't remove a wire. I don't remove a piece of paper. I'm still old school because it's challenging. So everything I've shown you, you know, I always wanted a Hasselblad. Petra was talking about having a Hasselblad. I always had Hasselblad envy, you know, and I wanted square. So when I got to my Olympus and I found I could create a square in the frame, I thought, I can do Hasselblad. But I'm visualizing in square. And so I like to keep that challenge up, and a little bit more, a lot of processing with infrared, so it's not quite as pure as my color images in that sense. And it's my philosophy. I don't impose that on anybody else. I don't care what anybody else does. And digital has opened up lots of creative possibilities. But for me, I really just, I just want to be right there with the world and make everything matter in the image. And of course, seeing differently with infrared. In Mongolia, yeah, I worked hard to get that arrow. Boy, I was lying on the ground for a long time with a fast shutter speed. So, you know, again, there's a lot I could say about the processing, but I'm not going to go into that. But, you know, a lot of images don't work because I'm working with what's called 590 nanometer. And this is the show. It just came down a few days ago in Santa Fe. And I was working with a lot of washi paper, Japanese paper. This is on Japanese paper. And you'll see this image over here, the monk, in the exhibit. I sent the one that's on this very special washi paper that I love. And then the fire dancer in Colombia, Guizhou, China, where I spent a lot of time photographing the minorities in Guizhou, Bhutan, and the Moken Sea Gypsies, which I was talking about today. And this is in Myanmar, and I've been going to Myanmar every year since '86, and until 2019, and of course, a lot of sad changes at that point. And Japan, there I photographed quite a bit, Colombia, and that is the guy who's lying there. That's him in the mural. He just was always, Louise was always lying there, and the muralist just went, I'm just going to paint you. So, you know, it was great. But unfortunately, he's passed away. So this is in Route 66. This is the Cadillac Desert and Twin Arrows. During the pandemic, I went up and down the Route 66 quite a bit. It was so interesting. Very nostalgic picture from Myanmar. So I love this quote by Henri Cartier-Bresson. It's an illusion. The photos are made with the camera. They're made with the eye, the heart, and the head. So I'm going to end. We were talking about the Moken Sea Gypsies, and I thought I'm going to pull out this old video because this was a really important National Geographic assignment for me because I photograph a lot of cultures, and most of the cultures I photograph are actually flourishing. And I find tribal customs and tribal events are coming back, and I love it. And this is one of the first cultures that I visited and photographed, and that the culture's vanished. The language is trying to be recovered in Thailand. But I spent 6 weeks, I went with, I don't know if you know the glassmaker William Morris. He was a really good fisherman. And we spent 6 weeks going through all the islands of the archipelago in Myanmar. So I'm going to show you. This is about just 3 minutes.
This is good.
Can you believe that what they were picking up those sea urchins with their hands and walking? I mean, they were amazing. And yeah, it's unfortunately, I don't know if the culture is completely wiped out in Myanmar, but due to the opening of the country and things, actually in many ways, the early